that slide is pretty awesome. It's by Rands. So if you ever do public speaking, put a slide like this at the start, and if the circle is not a circle, you know your slides are wonky. I'm going to talk about time and creativity. Thank you to Mark. I remember when he invited me, we were drinking really terrible Guinness in a hotel bar in Dublin. He asked me, I came off stage at a talk in Dublin, and he said, do you want to speak at Beyond Tellerant? And literally said, yeah, definitely. Completely cancelled everything I was doing so I could come, because I was just like, Mark had told me that he invites people who are his friends and who are good speakers. I'd known him for a whole bunch of time. He'd never invited me to speak, and I thought, shit, I must be really shit at speaking. So when he asked me, I was like, thank God, maybe I'm actually not that bad, right? So I'm going to talk about time and creativity. I have a tendency to swear. I do swear an awful lot, so if you're easily offended, leave now, because there's no chance of me not swearing at all during my talk. I'm going to start with a short story that frames this talk around about time. This is about a year ago. It's the 1st of January 2015, and normally my 1st of January involves getting up, usually with a hangover because we're in Ireland and we drink a lot, and then going and throwing myself into the sea and swimming on the New Year's Day swim, which raises money for charity. So my New Year's Day is usually something like this, swimming in the sea. You can't wear a wetsuit when you're doing this charity swim. You have to go in, like, not naked, but like with swimming trunks and stuff, right? And so that's my normal New Year's Day. So I got up and I was ready to go. I had got up in the morning, got a coffee, started to do some writing, because I was going to start the year off the way I intended to go for the year. Get a blog post done, tomorrow I'll do another one, so on and so forth. After about 2 hours of doing that, I got up and I just couldn't move. My whole body was like really, really painful. So I was like, I have some back problems, and I'm thinking, maybe it's my back, maybe it's the way I've been sitting. So I got up and I'm like, I can't, I've got this intense pain in my chest, and I'm thinking, this is not a good thing. I'm going into the kitchen, living room area, and I'm saying to my wife, look, I've got this really bad chest pain. Maybe it's just my back. And after about 2 hours of this, my son, who is 17 at the time, is sitting there saying, Dad, you're having a heart attack. In this really kind of blasé manner. And I'm saying, like, I'm definitely not having a heart attack. I'm fine. It's just back pain or something like that. After about 3 or 4 hours of this, I really was thinking I was having a heart attack. I do not live a very healthy lifestyle. I drink far too much, smoke too many cigarettes, and just basically not a very healthy lifestyle. So an ambulance called. My wife phoned the emergency services. They said, okay, what's the symptoms? They described all the stuff. And they said, okay, this does not sound good. And halfway through the phone call, the line just dropped. And she's like, shit, okay, the phone isn't working anymore. And so she phoned them back, and they said, okay, it's you, we were talking to you a minute ago. And she said, yeah, I'm not sure, but I think maybe my husband is having a heart attack. And they said, oh, don't worry about it, an ambulance is on its way. We've already sent it. And it's New Year's Day, so I'm thinking, like, there's going to be no ambulance because it's New Year's Day, right? So everybody is probably, the ambulance people are probably a bit hungover, and they're probably not wanting to drive, right? And suddenly this ambulance arrives. Oh, it's the most awesome feeling in the world. This ambulance pulls up. They start plugging in some sort of morphine and stuff. They're like, do you want more morphine? I'm like, yeah, bring it on. Give me more morphine. That sounds good, And so I'm sitting there in this ambulance, doped up to the eyeballs on morphine, and thinking, shit, this is it. I'm going to die. I wrote about this the next day. I made it home after a day in the hospital being hooked up to all of these different things. And I wrote this blog post on my very unstyled blog. HTML is the way to go. CSS is shit. But it's HTML all the way, people. So I wrote this blog post. Thank you, whoever was saying that, yeah. HTML is a design element. So I wrote this blog post. I'll never forget that moment, the pain still radiating outwards, so thankfully dulled by all this morphine that they were putting into me. And I wrote these messages on my phone, one by one, to my wife and to my 2 children. And I told them that I hoped that I would be home soon. I wasn't really convinced at that moment in time that I was going to be home soon. I literally thought I was going to die. And above all, that I loved them very, very much. And it was something incredibly sobering about this experience, sending these messages to your loved ones when you think that that's it, your time is up. All I could think of was everything I still wanted to achieve, the things I still wanted to do in life. Time had been slipping through my fingers, and now I might be out of credit. And that was the most sobering moment of my life. I was lying in this hospital bed in Letterkenny in Donegal thinking, this is it. This is the end. So I want to talk about time and creativity and not wasting time, but using every moment. I'm failure on Twitter. Yes, it's a German word, failure, for mistake, because there's a long story. Ask me over a beer and I will explain why I'm failure on Twitter. And the hashtag is btconf. So this is what I wrote to Mark. I think time and creativity are intertwined. We have a lot of time. We can use that time creatively, or we can waste it and we can let it fall through our fingers. And I'm really interested in strategies for maximizing the time that you have available, and then using that time that you have available to prime the brain and to be more creative. So I'm going to be talking about late binding, which is a fancy term for procrastination. I'm a super procrastinator. Procrastinators in the room? Yeah, good stuff. That's what I like to see. Great. Okay, so you're not going to be procrastinators anymore. You're going to be late binders. I'll explain that in a second. I'm going to talk about priming the brain, getting the brain ready for ideas, looking at joining the dots, how creativity works by joining up separate areas of knowledge, asking why repeatedly, and finally looking at the time bank. I'm a lecturer. I teach in Belfast, as well as I run my own company as well as a consultant, but I also teach, so I have to recommend some books. So, some light reading. These 3 books are all fantastic. I would encourage you to buy them all. The first book by John Perry, The Art of Procrastination, is awesome. He calls it a guide to effective dawdling, lollygagging, and postponing, like putting things off as far as you can, and then using that time when you put things off to maximum potential. It's very, very good. The second book, Peter Drucker, Managing Oneself, is fantastic. It's very, very short. You can read it in about 2 hours. I try to read it maybe once or twice a year, certainly 2 times a year over the last few years. It's Managing Oneself by Peter Drucker. It's very, very good. And the final book is The Myths of Innovation by Scott Birkin, which is a really, really good book in terms of if you want to know where innovation comes from or how does innovation work. It's a really, really good myth-busting guide to some of the things that we think about in terms of innovation. I might be biased, but also I've been working on this for months, years actually. The first book in my tiny books is finished. And it's coming out. I was really hoping to have it coming out today, but there's just no way. I'm so busy. And I've been procrastinating too much as well. But it's coming out probably next week or the week after. I want to talk about late binding. Procrastination is often seen as a negative thing, and I think that that's actually wrong. I think that procrastination is a good thing if we use it effectively. So I want to reframe procrastination to make it not a negative thing, but a positive thing. I wrote this on Medium just the other day, also on my website as well, because Medium, hey, you have to own your own content as well. Procrastination is often seen as a negative. Yes, round of applause for that, right? You've got to own your own content. So the people who are at the, what was the thing yesterday? Indie Webcamp. Jeremy Keith, I think you were involved in that. Indie Webcamp, which is awesome. Own your own stuff. I mean, you can cross-post it to Medium if you want to. That's great. But own your own content. Procrastination is often seen as a negative trait. Reframe it, however, and you can reap its many benefits by unlocking the time that you should be working on the task at hand to explore other, I think, equally important avenues that have potential. A spot of computer science to explain what late binding means. So when we build something for the web, we can build it in one of 2 ways. We can build it in advance, where something is ready and it's all ready to go and it just gets delivered when somebody asks for it. Or we can late bind. I'll maybe click this again, and then we can see it. When somebody asks for something, we build it when they need it. And this is where this term late binding comes from. It's like building something when you need it, not beforehand. Because putting off the task has benefits. Don Norman, absolutely amazing thinker, says delaying decisions until the time for action is beneficial for lots of reasons. First, it provides the maximum amount of time to think and plan and determine alternatives. Second, it enhances flexibility, allowing the action to take full advantage of the unique circumstances at the time it's required. So waiting until we need to do the thing allows us to understand the context much more effectively and then build the thing as we need it. And finally, because the requirements are constantly shifting and changing, delaying decisions allows the most current issues and situations to be accommodated. So if we leave it until the last possible moment, we end up with something that is better because we understand the context much more effectively. So actually leaving stuff until the last possible minute and not starting it at this point in time has an awful lot of benefits. We've all worked to a deadline, right? Everyone's worked to a deadline. So you get the brief at this point here, and the deadline is here, and this point here I like to call maybe the shit your pants moment, where you think, fuck, I should have been working on this from here, and I've been fucking around all of this time, and now I really need to build this thing. And that's for me, it's the shit your pants moment. I think we all know that thing. We have that feeling. We think, if I don't start this task now, it's not going to get done. And so we start to think, I better get started, right? And if we're uncareful about it, all of this time can be wasted. But I think we can actually use this time more effectively. So here we have the brief, and here we have the deadline. And this is what I think is pretty much the creative process that we all do. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you'll probably recognize a lot in here. So we get the brief, and we know the deadline. And then we have this phase called the fuck off phase. It's like, yeah, fuck you, I'm not going to work on that because I've got other things I want to waste my time on. And then we have the mad panic phase. That's when you go, oh, the shit your pants moment. You think, oh my God, I better get this done. And then we have the all the work while crying phase. Right? You're like, shit, I should have got this done earlier. Jeez, what am I doing? And that's when you're crying and you try and get the stuff done. And I think that's pretty much, unless you are completely unique and you're like a super, super organized person who always does the work from the moment the deadline starts, there's always going to be this phase called the fuck off phase. You can use the fuck off phase to widen your knowledge, build in margin, have some space in your life to actually get more done and just to be able to breathe from time to time. And you can also use that time for passion projects or side projects, things that really are important to you. So use that fuck off phase effectively, and you can actually maximize the amount of time you have available. Don't let that fuck off phase just trickle through your fingers and waste it. Use it for other stuff that you should be working on the task at hand, but there's these other exciting things that you really want to work on. Work on those things, and do you know what? You'll hit the shit your pants moment, you'll get the work done. You might be crying, but you'll still get it done. Don Norman says, a lack of time pressure allows the mind to be creative, to explore possibilities, and a bit of stress focuses the mind, allowing the final compilation of the earlier random creative thoughts. And I think that this is true. If you start the work at the point at which the deadline arrives, or the brief arrives, and you try and build it as quickly as possible, you don't have all of that time for creativity and all of that time to kind of like allow your mind to wander. If you wait until if you go through the fuck off phase and you work on all those side projects and all that stuff that's really important to you, and you hit the shit your pants moment, and then you start to do the work while crying, do you know what? You make decisions much, much quicker. You don't spend ages saying, do you think it's better like this or like this? And your friends are going, what's the difference? You're like, this one is 1 pixel over. And they're like, what? And you can see it, but they can't see it. You just get those things done, and you stop to worry about all of that kind of stuff, and you just get the task done. Every slide needs Ron Burgundy. Procrastinator, no, I just wait until the last second to do my work because I will be older and therefore wiser. I think we need to prime the brain as creatives. I think we're guilty sometimes of skimming along the surface when what we need to do is dive a little bit deeper. All of these things are great. These are all great things. But I think there are other areas of knowledge that we can explore which can make us more creative. All of these things will change. All of these things will be out of date in about 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time. But creativity won't change. That kind of knowledge that you have built up, that creative depth of knowledge, will stand the test of time, where these kinds of things will change over time. We also need to start to kind of widen the frame of reference and look beyond the current area of specialism. Avoid easy answers and shave yaks. Does anyone know yak shaving? Yak shaving is awesome. So this is yak shaving. Oh, he has to fix the light. Oh, the drawer is a bit squeaky. Oh, and it needs fixed. Oh, yeah, some oil here wouldn't go amiss. Oh, we're at a WD-40. Better get in the car. Oh, something wrong with the car. Can you replace the light bulb in the kitchen? What does it look like I'm doing, right? This kind of yak shaving type thing, I think, is a great way of building up your knowledge. Allow yourself to just kind of follow the paths and see where those causal relationships take you. Because all of these things are kind of connected to the task of fixing the light bulb, but they're all things that you're going to learn along the way. And I think that yak shaving is something that's pretty powerful. Carlin Vieri says yak shaving is what you're doing when you're doing some task that bears no obvious relationship to what you're supposed to be working on, yet a chain of 12 causal relations links what you're doing to the original meta task. So that guy saying, what does it look like I'm doing? I'm trying to fix the light bulb, when he's in the car and he's trying to solve that problem. That's all part of the yak shaving process. And I think that yak shaving is something that we should all embrace a little bit more. Knowledge is connected. We live in a world where there are all of these really rich fields of knowledge, and if we start to try and find the connections between these areas, we start to come up with new things. So we have depth of knowledge, and we also have breadth of knowledge as well. I would encourage you to join the dots, to look at these other areas, to expand your kind of frame of reference, to widen your frame of reference, and look beyond your current area of practice and look at other areas too. So we have all of these different spheres of knowledge, and we need to look beyond where we are now to other areas of practice. This guy is awesome. Does anyone know him? It's Charlie Munger. Does anyone know Charlie Munger? Charlie Munger. I'm in my lecturing mode, so I say to my students, write that down. Charlie Munger, write that down. Charlie Munger is Warren Buffett's partner. Do you know Warren Buffett, the investor? So Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger work together. They run Berkshire Hathaway, which is one of the most successful investing companies in the world. And Charlie Munger is one of the most interesting people. When you think about Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, Berkshire Hathaway, investing in stocks and shares, you sort of tend to think about people who are sitting in front of like a Bloomberg screen with things going green and things going red and what have you, and tracking data and all of this kind of stuff. Actually, that's not what Charlie Munger does. Charlie Munger gets into the office in the morning, and he just sits in his comfy chair and he just reads a bunch of books. And then every once in a while he invests in some shares because he understands things like psychology or human nature. And what he's doing is not really looking in the area of investing per se, he's looking at the area of life. And that makes him a much more powerful investor, and that's why I think Berkshire Hathaway is so successful. Munger has this term, a lattice work of mental models. So the idea is to build like this lattice work where we have all of these different mental models and we start to build a mesh or a frame connecting all of these things together. He also talks about man with a hammer syndrome, where you have a problem and you're confronting a problem and you tend to confront that problem with the hammer that you currently have to hand. So you have a certain way of doing things and you approach the problem at hand with that certain way of doing things, when sometimes actually it would be worthwhile looking at other ways of doing things. So don't always look at a screw and think hammer, screw, this is the tool for the job because a screwdriver might actually be better. So don't suffer from man with a hammer syndrome. And if you do that, if you start to kind of like open out what you're looking at and start to look at more stuff, you end up with this Gestalt theory where 1 + 1 is more than 3. 1 + 1 is greater. Holy shit, that should actually say more than 2. Fuck. I hate that when you see that on your slides, especially when you've gone through them a million times like I have. So 1 + 1 is more than 2, not 3. But it's more than 3 as well, right? Because, it's more than everything, right? So 1 + 1 is more than the sum of the parts. And so if we start to look at the other areas around our practice, we can become better designers and more creative. So things like psychology. anthropology, economics, mathematics, heuristics, accounting, pricing. These are all things that we need to know about as creatives, as designers. And I think that we need to spend a bit more time not just looking within this sphere of knowledge that we have, but starting to explore other connected spheres of knowledge. And when we start to pull all these things together, we end up with something that I call a whole mind, something that is much, much more powerful. We then have the depth and the breadth, and those things come together to create what Tim Brown, not the Tim Brown from Typekit, but the Tim Brown from IDEO. Write that down, Tim Brown from IDEO, he's pretty awesome. So Tim Brown from IDEO calls these people T-shaped thinkers. People who have a depth of knowledge in an area, but they also have an understanding of a wider area of knowledge as well. And those two things start to come together and make you a better designer. Especially when we work, as creatives in teams, where we're working with a number of different people, and we are starting to think about, we need to be able to talk the language of the other people that we're working with. So we need to, as designers or developers or whatever, train our brains to understand other people's ways of thinking. Because once you start to join the dots, you get to unexpected connections, and those unexpected connections is where the magic happens. The best way to show this is with a short video from the 80s. Before we get to that video, Pareto. Do you know Pareto? Write that down, Pareto. 80-20 rule, he's the guy who did the 80-20 rule. He says an idea is nothing more or less than a new combination of old elements. So if I take this wouldn't exist without a computer. It wouldn't exist without a typewriter, because there is like a keyboard here. Maybe I'll just text my wife. So I'm not going to text my wife, but this is a typewriter right here, but it's in the screen. So this thing is, while marvelous, a connection of a whole bunch of other things that existed before. A telephone, a typewriter, a computer, all of these things coming together to create this magical new object. And so any new idea is actually made up of old ideas, and all of those old ideas are also made up of old ideas. So if we start to track back through everything, we start to see that everything is actually made up of other things. And there's very little that's new in the world. What's new and exciting are the connections. Now it's time for that video. I love the way she's looking at him.
Chocolate.
Peanut butter.
Hey!
Oh, hey, you got your chocolate and my peanut
You got
butter.
peanut butter on my chocolate.
What?
Delicious.
Two great tastes that taste great together. Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. Real milk chocolate, delicious peanut butter.
Reese's Peanut Butter Cups.
And Reese's Crunchy Peanut Butter Cups, topped with chopped peanuts.
So Reese's, isn't it awesome? I love that video. So Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. I have a packet of those. I was going to eat them the other night while watching MasterChef. I didn't get around to eating them sitting in my studio. Reese's Peanut Butter Cups are basically like a kind of metaphor for this kind of like idea of connecting different forms of knowledge. We got, chocolate, and we got, peanut butter. And then also, I don't know if you noticed, but she has like a bar of chocolate, or she has the peanut butter and he has a bar of chocolate. And suddenly they have gone from 1 bar of chocolate to 2 bars of chocolate in that advert. And I'm like, okay, continuity, that's not quite working there. Peanut butter, chocolate, Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, right? So take this peanut butter, take this chocolate, put them together, you end up with something amazing, unless you have a nut allergy, in which case it's not amazing. But, if you don't have a nut allergy, Reese's Peanut Butter Cups are amazing, and they're like a kind of metaphor for this kind of pulling together different chunks of knowledge. So a collision of unexpected ideas leads to something new and unexpected. And in this coming together, we discover new and never before expected outcomes. Just by chance, walking down the street with your bar of chocolate, and someone else who's walking, I can't quite imagine somebody walking down eating out of a peanut butter thing, but there you go, that's what the lady is doing. And then we end up with this collision of these things, and we end up with Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. And that's because we've taken these two chunks of knowledge that were previously not connected and accidentally collided them. And that's where I think that this idea of expanding your knowledge frame set, you're widening your gene pool in terms of your ideas, ends up with new and exciting outcomes. Ask why repeatedly. God, this guy called Satoshi, I haven't got my notes here, but he's called Satoshi something or other, Japanese fella, Toyota, I believe. And he came up with this kind of like 5 whys thing. Ask why 5 times. If you have a problem and then you ask why, and then you answer that, and then you ask why, and you answer that, and you ask why, and you keep drilling down deeper, you end up at the root cause of the thing. So there is this possibly apocryphal story about Jeff Bezos, who somebody gets injured in one of the Amazon factories. We'll call them, is it being videoed? Is the talk being videoed? Possibly. We'll call them the slave places, right? Because anyone who works for Amazon, it sounds pretty awful, right? So somebody gets their thumb injured in one of these Amazon slave factory places where they kind of pack up all of the products and send them out to you. And so Bezos says, why did this happen? Well, it got caught in a conveyor belt. Why did his thumb get caught in a conveyor belt? Because he was chasing his bag. Why did he put his bag on the conveyor belt? He put his bag on the conveyor belt, and why did this happen? He was using it as a table. I can't quite work out how that would work because the conveyor belt is moving like this, so it's not a very good table per se. Why was he using the conveyor belt as a table? Because there are no lockers for staff storage, so that's where he was keeping his stuff. Boom, this is the root cause of the problem. So if we actually ask why 5 times or multiple times, we can get to the root cause of the issue at hand, and we can start to delve down into the depth of the knowledge that we need to understand as creatives. I've been working with a company in Belfast called Gather. They're awesome. They collect basically all of your media, audio, video, all of that kind of stuff. So you watch something on YouTube, or you listen to something on Spotify, or you listen to something on SoundCloud, shout out for SoundCloud, and you've got all of this stuff, and it's all disparate across the web, and you start to kind of gather it together using mygather.co, and this then becomes kind of like your hub of all of your media. I was working with Phil, who's the co-founder of the company, and as usual with these kinds of jobs, somebody says, oh, Phil has a problem, can you help him? You're an educator, you do that as part of your job. I sort of think, well, it's not really part of my job, but he's an interesting guy. So I start to ask him, why are you doing this, Phil? What is your intention? And before we started the process, he said, it's an app I wanted for myself, and I couldn't find it, so I thought I would build it. And I said, well, that's great, but why? Why are you doing this? Let's keep asking why and drill down to the root cause of the issue. And after all of these whys, he would email me back, and I'd say, but why, Phil? Why? Why are you doing that? And then he would email me back, and I'd say, but why? Why are you doing this? Then he'd email me back, and I'd say, but why? What is the intention of this? Until we eventually ended up with this. If we don't shape ourselves, then life becomes prosaic and flattened. We flourish more as individuals and communities when we are engaged and creative. I think if you look at the before, it's an app, there was no such thing, and I needed one, so I just thought I'd build it myself, to the after, which to me is much, much more kind of interesting and much more rooted in a kind of Phil trying to develop himself as a person and develop something that satisfies a deep-seated human need. This then can become the kind of heart of a mission statement or the heart of a kind of creative purpose to explain to other people. And it's all through asking why repeatedly. So use those 5 whys to identify your purpose. I passionately believe, especially since the heart attack incident, which thankfully wasn't a heart attack, but I passionately believe that finding your purpose, finding the thing that really motivates you, finding the thing that you feel excited about, finding the thing that wakes you up in the morning, you think, yes, this is what I'm going to do. I think that's really, really important. The first book on the Tiny Books thing, talks about stop procrastinating and pursue your passion. In some respects, it's kind of contradicting what I'm saying here because I'm all about procrastination. But it's about making your passion the heart of your purpose. I invited Kai Brach, the publisher of Offscreen magazine, to write the foreword for the book, and he said, in the interest of full disclosure, I should send you this link to this article I wrote, which is like, don't pursue your passion, or why pursuing your passion is bullshit. And I was like, shit. because passion is pretty much the heart of the book, right? And he's written a blog post saying that passion is overrated and that it shouldn't be the thing that you do. And I wrote back to him and I said, okay, well, I've read your article and here are some thoughts I have on that. You said X. Here's my answer to that. I think you're wrong. You said Y. Here's my answer to that. I think you're wrong. You said Z. Here's my answer. I think you're wrong. And then I kind of thought, okay. And then at the end, I wrote as well, sorry, it sounds like I'm being very argumentative here, but I think you're wrong. I think pursuing your passion is everything. And I thought probably that's the end, and he's not going to write the foreword. But then very, very nicely, he wrote the foreword and said, okay, I've changed my mind. This is really, really important. Pursuing your passion does mean an awful lot. And understanding what that passion is and drilling down to find your purpose is really, really important. And then having some actionable tools to turn that thing into a reality can, I think, change your life and make you a better person. I want to close by talking about the time bank, which kind of brings us back to what we talked about at the start. So the time bank, we all draw from the time bank every day. Everybody gets 86,400 seconds a day. You get 86,400 seconds. You, everybody. We all get the same, 86,400 seconds. We can't save it, because once it runs through our fingers, that's it. We can't save it. We can't kind of like back it up or anything like that. Once that time has trickled through our fingers, that is it. It's gone, right? So it doesn't matter if you are rich or you are poor. You have the same amount of time every day as everybody else. And so it's really important to use those seconds to the best of your ability. So each morning you go to the time bank, David Hyatt says, the cashier gives you 86,400 seconds to spend, and you've got to spend it. So you should make every single second count. And bear in mind that those 86,400 seconds, that's the day, right? Some of those seconds you're going to be sleeping, hopefully, right? And some of those seconds you're going to be eating. And some of those seconds you might be watching MasterChef or EastEnders or whatever the soap is in Germany, right? Where that time is trickling through your fingers. So actually you don't really have 86,400 seconds. You have a bit less than that because you've used a bunch of time for other things that you need as part of your life. So the average UK male gets 31,025 days. And I'm definitely not the average UK male, so I don't think I have 31,025 days, because I haven't lived a very healthy lifestyle. But I've already used 16,752 of those days already, because that's a fact. Okay, we can't, and tomorrow will be 753. So I have 14,273 days left. That's quite sobering when you look at it like that, because you start to think, okay, if you're a plus 40, I'm 46, or I think I'm 46 or 47, something like that. I'm never sure, and I should find that out and just get it tattooed. But then if I got it tattooed, I'd have to get it re-tattooed every year because the number would go up, right? But I'm definitely in the second half of my life. And that moment, being in that ambulance on New Year's Day last year, was incredibly sobering for me, because that really brought this 14,000 days into very crystal clear focus and started to make me think, you know what, I haven't actually got that much time left. I'm into the second half of my life. I need to make sure that every ounce of time is used to the best of my ability. I interviewed Stephen Heller. If you don't know Stephen Heller, he's an amazing type guy. I interviewed him for the last issue of 8 Faces. Very intimidating to interview Stephen Heller because he's hugely intelligent. And it was great. You know, I'm asking him questions, he's responding, I'm putting them into the article, it's great. And then he wrote this, which I don't think we put into the article for 8 Faces. Time once seemed infinite. As we get older, and I'm now 63, time speeds up exponentially. It's incredible. The same hour that felt like a decade when young now feels like a minute. And I could relate to a lot of this because I interviewed him just not long after that ambulance incident. And I felt like those hours are actually hurtling by very fast. When you're younger, they're hurtling by quite slowly. The older you get and the closer you get to the finish line, they're hurtling by much, much faster. And he went on to say, it's just not fair. So when I was in that ambulance, hurtling down the road, very bumpy roads in Donegal, but I was like off my face on morphine, which was just great, and they're like, are you okay with the bumpy roads? And I'm like, yeah, this is just great, more morphine, please. When I'm hurtling down that road in the ambulance to the hospital, thinking, this is it, my time has come, I'm about to die, shit, I wish I'd done all of these things. That kind of hours slipping through your fingers, the minutes slipping through your fingers, all of that kind of stuff comes crystal clear into focus. Finding your purpose is incredibly fucking hard, but I think it's really, really important. When the Grim Reaper calls, when you're in that ambulance and you're literally hurtling down the road to the hospital and you're thinking, this is it, this is the end, you need to be 100% sure in yourself that you have done everything that you needed to go safely to the other side, legacy intact. And for me, that moment was a real wake-up call. I started to think to myself, okay, I've achieved an awful lot of things in my life, but there's a whole bunch of other things that are much, much more important to me that I haven't done yet, and I have to get these things finished. And so coming back from the hospital the next day and eating a Domino's pizza on the way home, that's probably not very healthy. Coming back from the hospital the next day after my Domino's pizza, pepperoni, very, very tasty, I just thought to myself, you know what, I need to stop doing all of this shit, and I need to start focusing on the stuff that really matters. Don't waste time. You only get so much of it. We all get the same every day. Everyone's the same. No one is different. No one can save. Once it goes, it goes. Use every moment that you have effectively to the best of your purpose. Hunter S. Thompson, I had a debate with my editor, Owen Gregory, about this quote because there's a lady called Mavis Learer who apparently has said something like this, and he's like, no, this lady is a fiction. She doesn't exist. I believe it's actually Hunter S. Thompson who said this. And then I had to buy 3 Hunter S. Thompson books and read them in order to try and source this quote. Hunter S. Thompson, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, definitely lived a very unhealthy lifestyle. Life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in broadside in a cloud of smoke, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and proclaiming, what a ride. And for me, that moment in the ambulance, it wasn't for me, what a ride. It was great with the morphine, but it was definitely not what a ride. And so I started to think to myself, okay, what do I need to go and do to fix this and to change things? Use every moment that you have to the best of your ability. Make something that matters and do something awesome. That's me. Thank you.